decision-making. We have our very own Dr. Annika Wolf, Executive Director of III speaking, Jessie Pool from Leiden University, and Judge Susana Arango, Superintendent of Bankruptcy Proceedings in Colombia. Over to you, Annika.
Well, thank you for this introduction, Evan, and we are very delighted to be at least virtually in New York with you all. Also, we all wish, obviously, that we will be there with you. It's going to be a great pleasure for me to share knowledge with Jessie and Susana, who have a totally different background, together with my background coming from finance. One is the legal part, the other one is also looking at corporate fraud. And that would be basically my first question. When everybody talks about AI, Jessie, what would you explain AI actually is? How are you using it?
Thank you, Annika, for the wonderful introduction. I think that's a very interesting question because that was how I got involved with artificial intelligence, actually. I'm looking at corporate fraud, and I saw some insolvency practitioners and trustees using AI to investigate fraud and to use it for asset recovery and stuff like that. So I was thinking, well, what is it? How does it work, the AI? And I did some research, and actually I saw that it was not clearly defined what artificial intelligence is. And I saw that from literature from some years ago that even the automatic processes in airplanes were called AI a few years ago. So it's actually very difficult to really understand what AI is. So what I did was just look at the software that was being used by the trustees. And I saw that it was actually quite easy to understand because what they do, and I tried to get familiar with some coding languages such as Python and R. And I actually thought, why can't I make an algorithm myself? So I tried to do that. And then I made like a certain code, and it's really easy to do that. And it's also very easy for lawyers as myself to understand how the code works. It's actually an if-else statement. So you get an if there's a certain behavior from a director, or is there certain circumstances, and then you have the else statement, then there's a certain outcome. So it's almost like an Excel statement when you need programming and when you have colors in the Excel sheet. So what I actually found out that artificial intelligence is very broad, but it's not that difficult. It's more easy. It's easier than we thought. It's not like we have a machine making decisions. It's really like the human, we program the artificial intelligence, and then we make the decisions with it. So I think that's very a broad description of what AI is, and I was actually very pleased to learn about how it worked.
So Susana, when are you using AI in your field? Or how did you come to use it in the first place?
Thank you very much, and thank you to the III and the NextGen for this invitation, and thank you, Annika and Jessie. Well, I have a more practical approach to the artificial intelligence because we have been using it as a response to the increase in the number of proceedings, of bankruptcy proceedings in Colombia. So the Superintendence of Companies is the bankruptcy court in Colombia, and we anticipated an increase in the numbers of the proceedings. So we started to incorporate these tech tools and artificial intelligence basically and at the beginning to the analysis of the filings. When I first got into the Superintendence of Companies in 2018, the filings were taking around 5 to 8 months to be reviewed and processed by people. And then we thought that a lot of these tasks could be done by systems, by tech tools, because it's supposed that you take some information and make a cross-reference with other authorities, such as the registry of the identity of the people. And we thought, well, we could use better the knowledge and the expertise in tasks that will actually add value to what we are doing as bankruptcy court. So we developed these tools, and today I'm very proud to say that the decision for the admission or rejection of a bankruptcy petition takes between 3 days and 1 month when the information is not complete. So it's working, and it's working in the sense that we are having the opportunity to use the humans' expertise for problem solving and other tasks that actually add value, and not just paper processing and information processing. And also we use these for our data lake information that will help us also predict insolvency for other entities that have not yet formally filed. So we are doing it in practice.
And I think you mentioned just an interesting point, because if we look at different definitions of AI that we all discuss, it always says, it's the science of making machines do things that require intelligence if done by men. That's precisely what you just said, but it's been done a way faster than, any human could probably, look through these files to ensure that you actually go from 5 to 8 months to 3 to 5 days. And I think that's one of the important things. On the other hand, I know that a lot of people are always scared, is AI taken over by man? And what's going to happen to us? And I just want to point out like 2 things. And the one is that there are 3-level players of AI. So you have the so-called artificial narrow intelligence, which is probably pretty weak, and it's below human level intelligence. On the other hand, you have artificial general intelligence, which is stronger, but probably on the same level playing field as human intelligence. And then you have artificial superintelligence, which is really way above human level intelligence. And everybody is so scared because I think most people don't even know in which layer we are actually playing right now. And I think it's fair to say we're in the first level playing field so far. What do you think, Jessie?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a lot of people that are really scared for artificial intelligence and what it could do, but actually it's not that sophisticated yet. We still have to feed the machine, with machine learning or the artificial intelligence, the code, with our knowledge. So what it actually means, and what I find quite interesting, and I'm really curious to hear what you think about that, is that we as humans have to create a code or an algorithm or feed the machine with information. And we have this very nice saying of garbage in, garbage out, which actually means, and I think that's really interesting, because we lawyers have to come up with information to give to the machine. But I think we all agree that law concepts in law are very open texture. So it's really difficult to create a code. And I think one of the main difficulties with using AI in the law is the translation part. So I was really wondering, how are you thinking about translating between law and the open norms in law and actually the more mathematical experience needed for AI?
And I think this is one of the questions that probably is the most difficult, because as lawyers, it depends. Exactly. You have preferences in common law, and you have codification in civil law, but there's still it depends, depending on the circumstances of the case, depending on the substance of the case as well. So it would be interesting, because I know that Susana is using it. How have you fed the machine to ensure it's actually doing what it's supposed to do?
Well, for me, it has been a surprising and very interesting process to learn. I'm not an expert on tech tools, so I can tell you from my practical experience what we have done. This is something like we first have to show the experts that will program the system what we do and how we do it, like step by step. So we just made a lot of tech guys. Well, we first, as judges, we take these documents and then we review these, and we are trying to find this and that, and with that information we have to make this checklist work. And how we do it is this way. So we have to go to this database to check the information, and then we go to this other site to do this other review. So we first told these people that are experts in the programming how we work as judges, how we do it in our daily work. Then they take that information and make it rules for the program. So it makes rules such as the ID number for a national document. It's about these numbers, and you have to check it in the national registry. So these are specific rules that are entered into the system. So the system starts to learn, and this worked like it's like a new baby. So at the beginning, this system, we gave it a lot of information about the filings, examples of filings. So the system could only see images. It was not possible to understand, even in Spanish. It could not read. So then the system, after some processing of the information, started to learn Spanish as a language. And then it started to distinguish images from text. And then it started to learn Spanish, and it could understand, well, somehow understand the information, or at least tag the information to separate each part of the checklist that the system should review. And in the end, this system will do what a court clerk would do for the judge about checking the information. Of course, if there are sophisticated questions, if there are legal matters that must be resolved, the system does not have enough rules to go and make a decision, as Jessie was saying. This is something that will help the judge and the clerk to process the information. In the end, this tech tool or artificial intelligence that had to learn, that's why we call it intelligence or machine learning, at the end it will draft the decision that the judge will sign, mainly requesting additional information if the information is not complete, or with the proposal of the decision if the information is complete. So it's very helpful, and for now it has been a very important tool for the workload.
I would just come back to one thing, yes, Jessie, that you said about the algorithm, and that is something that we've also discussed when we prepared this panel, which I found probably one of the most specific things about the algorithm is you said, garbage in, garbage out, and we discussed the biases that, if you start coding, obviously there's a high percentage that you actually bring your own bias into this algorithm. So coming to these ethical questions to a certain degree and these biases, how do you think we need to deal with that?
I think that's a very, very important question, but also very difficult, because, for example, in the Netherlands right now, we have something called the toeslagenaffaire, which is with tax law, and there are a lot of people that have been blamed by the government that they were committing fraud, which actually they didn't do, but it had to do with ethnical profiling, and that was also a bias put into the machine. So I think it's very important for lawyers that are making the law and that are making decisions, so for example, the judges in the bankruptcy cases, to actually really consider, what do we want the computer to learn? What do we want to put it in? What are the objective criteria to understand and to investigate something? But on the other hand, we humans also have biases. And I think we can really use the artificial intelligence to really minimize the risks of the biases, but that really makes us, we have to understand how it works in order to make sure that we minimize the risk. I was also really wondering, when Susana, you were talking about the draft, the draft that comes out of the machine learning, out of the artificial intelligence, can you actually, or can the judge also see how the decision was made? How the computer came up with the draft? How do you do that?
Well, I think that I wanted to point out what you just said, that we transfer our biases, but it doesn't mean that when the human keeps all decision making, decisions will not be biased. So it's just the same problem, and we are actually able to correct those biases if we see them with these tools. We did all the programming to make the system draft the decision as we draft it. So it has to interconnect with the systems that we use for the drafts of the judicial acts, and the system will take the same wording because it's very standard. The admission, we are just there. We haven't moved to other substantial decisions yet, and that's a very like boilerplate decision where what we have to do is review on a checklist if the information is complete. So the system will tell you, yeah, the financial information for the last 3 years is complete. Why? Because the system knows now how to check it. The system will check if the plan for the reorganization is there. The system will not tell you if it's a good plan or not. It will just tell you it's there. There is a paper or a document stating that there is a plan. So the system learned how to do it, reviewing a lot of previous decisions, as it is a very boilerplated format for the system. I think it was not that hard to see how we do it, and what it is working better, or where the system is helping very much, is when the information is not complete, making the list of the information that doesn't fulfill the legal requirements. That makes the clerk go back to the information and check what the robot is saying. It's not that we just trust blindly what the robot says. If the robot says that something is not quite complete or is not there, then that's a flag for the clerk to go back to the information and check what's missing. And that's also very good, because we have noticed that when the system makes a mistake, we tell the system and we make some input, like for the system to learn that it was a mistake, and what it should do the next time is something else. We have an example with that when the system didn't understand that the ID number for a foreign person is not the same type of number of a Colombian citizen. So the system was completely confused about this fact that a foreigner has a different identification. Then we had to tell or teach the system how to identify a foreigner or a citizen that is not from Colombia, so the ID number is different. So it's something that goes back and forth, the system working and we telling and programming when there are some things that doesn't work as they should with this was being reviewed by just humans.
And I would like to come back to one thing, something that Jessie and I are probably more familiar with than Susana, and I'm just going to explain it for the audience, is in the European Restructuring Directive, there's one point, I'm just going to read this to you, because it says, when you have a viable company in financial difficulties, it has the directive should provide, or the member states should provide an access to effective national preventive restructuring frameworks, which should enable them to continue operating and should enable debtors to restructure effectively at an early stage to avoid insolvency, thus limiting the unnecessary liquidation of viable companies. And I think this is also referring back to what we heard on Monday from Ed Altman, who were very much in this prediction models and statistical models, which probably it's safe to say until the 1990s, that was the way going forward, using these models. Until then, we did move on to AI and ML, so artificial intelligence and machine learning models, which can help us to predict whether a company has a viable business model or it will go into financial distress. And whether it's really the right tool for any company, and the question is also, will there be a hub where this is being controlled or not, or how is it actually going to work? Because we are still at the first stage of AI, so to speak. But when we come back to what Jessie said at the beginning, being an expert in corporate fraud, how do you actually see these different statistical models as compared to AI ML models?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. Again, I really see a huge learning curve using AI to actually predict insolvencies and also to prevent insolvencies. Because what you see right now, artificial intelligence and especially the search tools that are being used, especially in the Netherlands, to investigate large and complex insolvencies and to see whether there have been irregularities that caused a bankruptcy. They're really now used to actually detect fraud and to see whether they can hold the director liable or not. But I really think that these tools, when used correctly, when used transparently, and when we have very sophisticated tools that really learned how to predict insolvencies, we can use them as early warning mechanisms to really show, and I'm not sure how the member states will do that to implement these early warning mechanisms, but I think that's a quite difficult thing to do. If you have this it's a very nice statement in the directive, but I'm not sure how they're going to implement it. But I think we can really use artificial intelligence to do that, because it's not only, oh, you did not pay rent or something like that, and now you're in financial difficulties. You really need these sophisticated models to predict insolvency. And I think we should use artificial intelligence, not for investigations in fraud, because there you have the biases, and there you have the hindsight bias, and really can focus and have tunnel vision using these tools. But if we use the tools to predict and to prevent insolvencies, I think that will be very helpful. And especially in the economic literature, there are a lot of models available to actually predict whether there will be financial difficulties. So I think we just need to make sure that we're going to translate it to lawyers so that they can and will use it as well.
I think economics is, probably in that part, it's easier because it's just numbers, and it's always more difficult, so to speak, to actually make sure that the numbers don't add up. It's more difficult, as Susana has said, than it is in law. Susana, you've always pointed out, our system. And the question is also, do you have trust in the system? Do you trust your system?
Yeah, we do, because we have seen it working. But I wanted to add something about the early alerts or early warnings. We have also a system that has predictive analytics. So the superintendent of companies is not only the bankruptcy judge, but it also has some administrative powers over the businesses that entails this entity to order some measures to prevent crisis. So we have been developing an early alert or warning model that takes into account historical trends that helps to segment into, we call that heat maps. Like if it were with heat, or it's cold or hot. So we have these heat maps based on the behavior and the historic behavior of companies and industries. And this will generate some notifications to trigger or to alert the authority to take some investigations or make some visits to the companies when the data is calling for that attention. This was done before just by humans taking thousands and thousands of information from companies. So it was more like a fishing expedition where they have to review a lot of information, and if they saw a red flag, they will go into that information. And now it's done with this system that will review the historic behavior of companies that are similar, and will give these alerts. So all the information is in the end processed. Is not a lottery that it used to be, that sometimes you get to be audited and sometimes you don't. This works in a way that allows the superintendents of companies actually use its powers to prevent the crisis. So it creates also like a descriptive, a financial indicator of the companies that are supervised. This system issues alerts when some defaults are identified, and this will allow the humans that have these powers and these obligations to intervene to actually go and see if there's something going on. Of course, as all these tools will take time to develop and to be every time better, because they are learning from the experience as well. So the more we use them, the more accurate and trustworthy they are. So the short answer is, yeah, we do trust our tools. They have been working with very good results, and this is not only very evident with the time reduction, but it also allows us to focus our attention and our time on complex matters and not just wasting time reviewing papers from one side to the other. So I believe that we have to understand these tools as part of our jobs, in the sense that they will help us a lot with tasks that tend to be repetitive and are not actually the best use of our time.
And I think you just made an important point, Susana. I just want to step in there. Is I think what we have to see is the value added, that a tool, and that's what it merely is. It's a tool that the tool actually brings to the process, and making sure that the human can concentrate on the things that a human is better than the artificial intelligence. And you mentioned when we discussed it, how your court and the size of your court has changed also with the virtual environment. Can you just give us an insight how your court works?
Sure. So the superintendents of companies, it's a governmental entity that it's part of the executive branch. This is a little bit strange because as part of the executive, I think this is only in Colombia that some of the executive entities exercise judicial powers, because we are not very big. So for us to have specialized courts, it works well when it's part of the executive branch. We have also antitrust courts in another entity. So the bankruptcy court is very specialized, just because it can be concentrated in this court. So we are very specialized judges. We have our main offices in Bogota, but the superintendents of companies has branches in other cities. So basically, we supervise as administrative entity almost every business in the country, which give us a great view on the economy, and what's going on with this part of the structure of the country. And as well, in another part of the entity, we work as bankruptcy court. So with the pandemic, we had to incorporate a lot of new personnel to the court, but we knew that the solution was not just bringing more people to do the same tasks, but because we had to better find some tools that will help us to make the best use of the human capacities. And that's why we started doing all these digital transformation. We also have now some tools that are useful not just for us as government, but also for the users of the information. So there is a tool called 360 View, where the users can take information about different companies. Everything is public, and they can use it to compare with other entities in the sector or in the industry. So this is being used just not just for us as government, but also for the people. So we have public cloud where all the information is being migrated, and I think that nowadays it has around 99.95% of the information. So it has this descriptive analysis that allows the users to have a 360 view of the companies that they are interested on.
I'm just smiling because, you know, Jessie, us in Europe, with our data protection, having a public cloud with all the information sounds like we just stepped in 100 years into the future, considering that I'm not even sure that, you know, a judge in a courtroom in Germany would actually appreciate, you know, loading information up. How do you see this happening actually in the Netherlands, which is by far a little bit more advanced, I'd say, than Germany?
I'm not sure if I agree with that. They're still not emailing with lawyers, and I think they started doing that during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it's amazing to see, because of the pandemic, they have to be forced to actually email with lawyers and using connections like Zoom and other types of platforms. And I'm not sure. I think it's very difficult for any change, especially with the courts, because they are very outdated, I guess. And they're very, I think they're also a bit scared to make use of these new technologies because of all the disadvantages. But I think that if we will come up, and we have to really work on that together, to maybe try to find how can we use the technology in our advantage. When I look at the research that has been done in my own PhD project, but also around the faculty, if I need, for example, an interview to be typed out, if I'm going to do that myself, it will take 5 or 6 hours to transcribe an interview. But if I ask a computer to do it, I will have it in 5 minutes, and it's almost perfect. And I think we try, sometimes we forget, and especially in the course, we forget that it's already with us. I think in the public, we see everyone using their cell phone, their laptops. The artificial intelligence is everywhere. If we're trying to find certain literature, if we're trying to find cases to support our points in a law case, then we're all using artificial intelligence in our advantage. And maybe it's time to really start a very nice discussion, and maybe the public has some opinion about that as well. How can we use the artificial intelligence in our advantage without forgetting what we are good at as humans? I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think Susana, and I'm coming back to that point that you just mentioned, Jessie, but Susana said also, you know, we have started our digital transformation, which sounds like, you know, like the future is now. Let's get it done. Let's, you know, see how we can use it. How would you explain to a judge the advantages of AI in a court?
Thank you. Well, with regards to the privacy of the information, I just want to point out something that Jessie was saying, is that probably the information is already there. So the information that we make public was also public before. It was just difficult to get into it, because everything is not all the company's information, is the financial information that it's public, and they have to file it anyway. So now the difference is that the information has always been public, but now you can find it, and it's there, and it is accessible to the users. So this is somehow reviewed under the data protection policies, of course. With regards to this is something that is happening now. What I would explain to the judge would go very similar to the way that the tech guys explain it to us, in the sense that they ask us, what do you do when you are drafting a decision? So we can tell them, well, we have to go to other cases where we have to check the case law, and then restate this case law in this new case, just to keep this decision line that comes from other cases. What tech tools do here and artificial intelligence do is that they will help you with that. They will go through the previous cases, give you the line, and you as a judge decide whether to go with this line or apart and do what you believe must be done. But why would you not like to know what has been said in other cases? Why would you prefer not having that information at hand, of course? And what I would tell the judge that has to check the financial information is, would you like someone that doesn't make a lot of mistakes and doesn't miss numbers to review the information for you? Would you like to have less human mistakes with so 3 zeros that were missing? And that would be nice. Then you will have this information processed through someone non-human that will not make a lot of mistakes. Would you like that? Of course I would like that. I would like to avoid human mistakes as well. So far as I keep the decision-making part of the game. And in that way, if we see task by task, what is the system making for us and where is it helping, why would I not like to have all the case law clear? This makes me think on sports and this VAR system to check when the players are not sure what happened and the referee wants to review what. Why wouldn't you like something to check if the human decision was right or not? This is useful.
Yeah, and I think what you just mentioned is, I think, one of the most important things that most do not consider. It's also the human factor of accepting, not just to use the tool, but accepting to probably to a certain degree, let loose of control. You know, you can't control everything, and to a certain degree, you have to trust the machine. So what you have to do, and that will be another question going to Jessie, integrating into the existing infrastructure, I think, is one of the aspects that we need to look at. But you also need to train judges. You also need to train the judiciary, and you need to train lawyers as well to make sure that you identify the right cases and the applications where AI and ML will actually have a benefit. How do you think, is it just an age issue, or how do you think we can make someone accept more likely that there are tools nowadays that weren't there in the past, and this can be value added?
Yeah, I think that's actually the most important thing in getting this artificial intelligence started, especially in courts, because if you look at the courts, they are all really looking at the circumstances of the case, and no case is actually the same. So, and as lawyers, that's very logical, because we are not trained to think in numbers. We are not trained to think in black and white. We're really trained in, okay, well, let's see, we have both sides. We have to consider all the circumstances and all the stakes. And then we make a well-informed, well-balanced decision. But still, and I'm doing that in my research, if you take all these cases from a certain topic and you code the cases, you code all the circumstances, actually, if you're looking at it a bit more abstract than a circumstance from a specific case, you find a lot of similarities between the cases. And I think what we have to do is really train lawyers and judges to think a bit more in numbers, to think a bit more in how can we use circumstances in a statistical model, because we can do that. If we have the outcome, for example, there's fraud or there's no fraud, you can really make, and that's what I'm doing as well in SPSS or in other software programs, you can make a program and you can make a statement that says, if this circumstance is there and that circumstance is there, then there will be fraud. And if there's another circumstance, there will be no fraud. So I think it's very much in the training of maybe not thinking that the law is that special. compared to mathematics or other social sciences, because we can really also put numbers on circumstances and on cases. And if we are, I think, starting to train lawyers and students and judges a bit more that way, to think in numbers and to think in cases and in certain topics, then they also see how it can be helpful. Then they see in the case, and especially in the bankruptcy cases, there are a lot of numbers involved. A viability
High
test,
numbers, large numbers.
Large numbers. We have to use a lot of numbers to check whether there is an insolvency, whether the company is viable. If we start to think more in numbers, I think that's a very great starting point.
And Susana, you have just nodded, so I'm giving the floor to you, because how do you see that?
Sure, I think that we do not apply a lot of numbers in law, because we believe that that's something like the opposite. When someone studies law, it's because it's not good with numbers, but in the end, this is about logic and the principle of logic. So our biggest fear is the biases of the decision making, but at the end, what everyone wants is that the law is clear and the rules are applied to everyone in the same way. So in the end, these systems are actually helping us to fight against biases. The main point of importance here would be to actually program well this and apply the logic principles to the programming. But in the end, everything is about logic, and actually we wouldn't like to take into consideration things that are not according to law. And laws are just rules that can be stated in numbers. So I agree with Jessie, and I think that the new generations are learning to program from kindergarten, and they understand this type of logic on how things work when you just give them the same instruction for every similar case. So in the end, I think it needs us to accommodate our thinking in the sense that these are social sciences, but logic must be, and logic is mathematics, must be the ground and the starting point for this to work. It is better to have a decision that is actually based on the applicable law and our expectation on how the law shall be applied. We shouldn't have surprises, and surprises are usually given in cases where the law is not applied as it should be. So I completely agree. This requires somehow to adjust our way of thinking and go more with logic and numbers, even though this is social part of life.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you just mentioned, is limiting surprises, because most of the time the surprises are actually the ones that are pretty costly. If you look at, especially if you look at fraud cases, that's something Jessie is just nodding. And I mean, I've done my thesis on Parmalat, so which one of the biggest fraud cases in Europe, and now we think, okay, we've understood the logic, and then we have Wirecard coming out, which everybody asks again, where did the system actually work? And the question there again is, could these fraud cases have been prevented, Jessie? It was the technological aspects that we just discussed.
I think it's very difficult to prevent fraud cases, because my experience, the people that want to commit fraud find their ways. But I think if we have functioning like the early warning mechanism, if we have like this system that states, okay, if you break the law, and we can somehow manage to actually see that, and actually in the AI see, okay, if we see these kind of things happen in a certain case, then there's a probability of 60 or 70 or 80% that someone has committed fraud. I think there is a possibility that we can create systems like that we can have like this red flag system. So hey, if someone does that, maybe there's a fraud case. And I think that could be very helpful, but I'm not sure if we really can prevent fraud with that. We can make sure that the people who commit fraud are actually caught, and maybe that prevents some people that want to commit fraud from doing it. But preventing, I think it's more that we can make sure that they are being sanctioned for it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Susana?
Well, I think that everything it's about the rules that you create, the rules understood as the law, and the rules that you can program to a system. So fraud, the problem with fraud is it doesn't go by the rules, but rather it goes around the rules. So it's hard to prevent, because you can have a lot of rules and you can program a system with a lot of rules, but fraud is about going around that. So so long as you or us as humans can have better rules and program it, the systems better, and we learn from other experiences, fraud could be harder to perform. But the problem is that fraud is always trying to find a way around the rules. So the problem would be that there will be always a creative way to go outside of that. Of course, not just with artificial intelligence, but all the intercommunication in the world, it seems that it could be easier to find or trace money, for instance. But of course, it's easier to hide as well with these cryptocurrencies and stuff that it is not easy to locate physically. So this is something that could be always one step ahead. And we as regulators, one step behind, trying to understand what's going to be the next move.
Okay, and I think just to have the chance also for the audience to ask some questions, I think what has become very clear also in our discussion tonight is there's a huge advantage and there's a huge new world out for all of us to a certain degree, and I think it's probably also, you know, from an economic point of view, it will be an advantage to all of us. I think what all of us need to do to a certain degree is amend to change and, you know, open up to a technology to actually use the advantage that technology will bring, accept the added value to the degree that there will be a loss of control, so to speak. But I think what definitely can be said, and I think that's what Susana mentioned, with the way they changed their system, is the future is now, and it's for us to a certain degree also within the NextGen program to shape that future. And I think with that, I'm just going to give over for any last thoughts to Susana and Jessie.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we have to try to keep the conversation going about how we can use artificial intelligence, how we can train ourselves into being familiar with the methods and the technology behind artificial intelligence. So, Susana, up to you.
Well, I would say that we have to start assuming this as something that is happening now, and that it's going to help us make our job in a better way and make make less mistakes, make more efficient use of our time as humans or as experts. So so long as we know where our fear comes from, we can understand and keep the systems working in our favor. If our system is that we do not retain enough freedom to make a decision, the point would be what amount of freedom do I need to go from one position to another if the rule and the law is clear. So if the law is clear, what do I need freedom to apply something that is clear. And the point is, if the law is not clear, then we have a problem with the law, not with the technology, right? So we have to actually understand where our fears come from and deal with the causes of those fears, so we can keep this in our favor.
And I will close with the point of freedom, because I do hope that the next time we'll be able to share a panel. Susana and Jessie, thank you very much for the discussion. We will be able to do this in person, and our freedom, we can celebrate our freedom again to a certain degree, and then we can travel across borders, and we'll be able to see each other and make use of the technology, see each other again in person. And I think with that, thank you guys. I'm just going to give it over back to Evan, I think.
Thank you very much for a very interesting panel. I guess I'll just open up really quickly to see if there are any questions. If not, we'll take a 10-minute break. There's none virtually and none in the room. So thank you again. Appreciate all your time and for a great panel.